Hey, what's up, everybody? Thank you for listening to Operation Agency Freedom, where we are bringing you top secret advice from the world's most badass digital agency owners. These amazing men and women are sharing their stories of how they have built 6, 7, and 8-figure digital agencies and how you can too. My name is Chris Martinez, CEO of Dude, where we help digital agencies by giving them the people and the processes so that they can scale profitably. Today, I am joined by my homie, Joey Gilkey from Tribe Prospecting. What's up, Joey? How are you doing today?
What is up, my man? I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Good to see you again.
Yeah, man. Always good to see you.
What's new in your hood today?
Dude, it is beautiful here in Knoxville, Tennessee. We're in a new office that has quite a spectacular view.
I saw that on the Instagrams or the Facebooks. Like, that view is insane.
Yeah, man. I would say there's probably only 2 other potential offices in all of Knoxville that have this kind of view. So we're very lucky. Hard work, I guess. Maybe not lucky. But we love it. The weather's incredible. I can see the mountains, the river, the city, all in one landscape.
Wow, that's awesome, man. So we're going to get all into your agency and how you've been able to get this amazing office that you have. But first, as we always start every podcast, we talk a little bit about you and some interesting things about like your story. And so the biggest thing or I think one of the most interesting things is that, you know, you were an athlete in college. You played college football, I believe, quarterback.
Yep.
Or
tight end, actually.
Tight end. Okay. So
on the receiving end of the quarterback.
Yeah. Yes. And the receiving end of some hits, I'm sure.
Guaranteed. Yeah.
But what most people might not realize is that you are a big giant nerd and you had a research paper on something. I'm going to do my best to say this word, but researching.
I look forward to it.
Methylenetetrahydrofolate reductase gene mutation. So tell us all about that, man. Tell us all about that and how you got into science.
The shortened version of that is MTHFR, which is not to be mistaken with another crass word you could use.
Yes, I see that.
But methylenetetrahydrofolate reductase gene is essentially, I was a psychology major for one. I was also a theater minor. Most people don't know that. So not only was I a football player, but I was also running away from practice, taking my pads off, showering, and then throwing on some theatrical costume and standing on a stage.
That's we got to find some photos of that. Liz, make a note of that. You got to find Joey and his acting
good
costume.
Luck. My wife is trying; she can't surface any. So, I this study I did my senior year of college was on this MTHFR. There's my cell phone. My apologies.
That's all good.
MTHFR, which is essentially an enzyme in the body that breaks down folate, hence methylenetetrahydrofolate reductase. And long story short, this enzyme converts folate into a bunch of other important things that turn into like dopamine, which is happiness and stuff. And so you notice that a lot of depression and stuff comes from this enzyme malfunctioning. So I actually have the genetic mutation that says that mine does not act correctly. And so I was like, well, I'm going to figure out what is it that causes it? How do you fix it? And so I ended up doing this deep study, which is a very unresearched topic at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it got picked up by my department, which got picked up by a bunch of other things. And they still use it today. My presentation, they still use it in the psychology department.
Wow.
College. Yeah.
What were some of the findings that you uncovered through your research?
Yeah. So what happens is you consume folate in.
What is folate?
Like folate is found in like leafy greens.
Uh-huh.
Your body, so this enzyme converts it into folic acid.
Mm-hmm.
And then that folic acid goes through a couple other chain reactions that turns into something called SAMe, which then goes through the Krebs cycle, turns into it oxygenates the body. It also helps create serotonin, norepinephrine, and dopamine. And my findings were there was a link. There's 2 different types of mutations. The first one is a little more minor compared to the second one. The second one, which I don't have, is linked to a lot of things like Alzheimer's, dementia, heart disease, The one that I have is more linked to like depression, bipolar disorder, which thankfully I don't have. And they are finding that you can actually supplement what would essentially be, picture a chain in the link, or a link in the chain broken, and that's the enzyme. You can essentially supplement what occurs after that chain link that's broken. And so you can skip that process of the enzyme converting folate into folic acid and just take straight up folic acid. And it kind of just essentially skips a couple steps, and then it can continue down the process and continue.
Wow. And so, like, what percentage of the population suffer from this lack of that enzyme?
Surprisingly, I'd have to go and look at the actual statistic. I still have the presentation somewhere. But a surprising amount. It said like up to 30% have at least one mutation. A smaller percentage have two mutations. So it's on a chromosome. So there's one on both sides essentially. And a very, very small percentage have two of the worst kind, which is essentially
the Alzheimer's and dementia.
Yeah, that one. Yep, exactly.
Wow.
So it's surprisingly more common. It affects probably not as many people of the people who have the genetic mutation. Typically, if you have two, that's when you start seeing the effects a little bit more. So I have two. I have struggled with a little bit of chemical depression, but you can supplement that out essentially, and I've not had an issue in half a decade or so.
Wow, that's great. Good for you. So let me ask you a question, because obviously this type of research really doesn't have anything to do directly with running an agency today. But when you were playing football, did any of the guys like give you shit because you were a nerd and you were going to the lab or to the theater like after practice?
Totally, of course. Thankfully, I was pretty cool. At the same time, it helped that I was a record-holding football player in college. And I'm a larger individual. I'm 6'3", 245 pounds.
Yeah, you're a big dude.
But, so at least the kickers wouldn't make money.
I was a kicker for one.
Yeah. You're a pretty big dude though. So
back then I was, I only played freshman year of football in high school. And back then I was like 135 pounds. So now I'm 205.
There you go. Throwing a couple hundred or throw 100 on there. Yeah. So I would be made fun of, but I was pretty tight with most of the guys on the team. I did a lot of stuff in the inner city as well. So I had a little bit of ability to relate to some of those guys who are coming in from those types of contexts and backgrounds. So I was a nerd, but surprisingly, a lot of these football guys are nerds. Like, a really weird thing that Dragon Ball Z is super, for some reason, Dragon Ball Z was widespread through my team.
Wow.
So anime and all that stuff. I don't know what it was, but it made its rounds to a lot of my teammates. So they couldn't throw a ton of shade because I could throw it right back.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and most people underestimate the amount of mental awareness and intelligence that it takes to play not just football but any sports. I mean, at the highest levels, at least in my personal experience and opinion, your physical ability only takes you so far. It's your ability to use your brain and anticipate and read the game and that sort of thing that helps you to differentiate yourself from somebody who has natural talent to being a real student of the game. Yeah,
exactly. And I think there were guys who were bigger than me, potentially probably more athletic in some capacity. And I was a 4-year starter, mostly because my field IQ was probably greater than most.
Yeah.
So that was pretty incredible to be able to combine the two. And you can't really teach IQ very much on the field, but that was a really neat experience for me.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome, man. Well, let's switch gears. Let's go from field IQ to agency IQ. And you are a stud when it comes to running an agency as well. So start out, tell us about how you got started with your agency and what you guys are specialing in now.
Totally. Yeah. So longer story made short, I had a career predominantly in sales, a couple different industries initially. So I did some IT recruiting. I did commercial risk management consulting at one point, and I would sell those services, which is really a fancy way of
sounds
commercial
really, sounds really, really exciting.
It was riveting. So didn't last there super long, maybe 18 months. Ended up leaving, falling in love with HubSpot at one point. At least they sucked me into their funnel and, at the time, content marketing was kind of just starting to get popular. So they sucked me into that. I started falling in love with digital marketing, ended up saying, well, let me fuse the two. Ended up going into sales in digital agency world, led to a director VP of sales role for a HubSpot agency. Was a part of that, grew it, scaled it, realized I was building this guy's dream and not mine, making him a lot of money. And I was making good money, but not near what he was. And so I was like, well, I know how to sell, so let me just go try to build one of these myself. So left that, started my own. At the time, I was calling it a growth agency, which is essentially a combination of both digital sales and digital marketing. And I was building sales funnels. I was doing advertising and content. I was kind of doing a little bit of everything.
Mm-hmm.
I was doing well in terms of we were growing. I was selling. I hated the deliverable side of things. I hated client services at the time. And I got into a mastermind, which is actually where you and I met.
Yep.
And in this mastermind was realizing that a lot of my peers' issues, so again, agency owners, I'm in a group of 70 agency owners, give or take. And most are creative, strategist type. They're not sales process driven people. And I, on the other hand, was not having issues with lead generation and creating opportunities. A lot of my peers were. A lot of them grew based off of word of mouth. And so I said, well, I have a skill set that a lot of these folks are having an issue with. Let me test it out on a couple of my buddies. I don't remember if you remember Amin Birdie, but I started with him. Super, super cheap, did it pretty much at cost, wasn't making anything, but I was at least proof of concepting an idea that I thought would work, which was essentially outsourced, done for you sales. So sales as a service for agencies. And that took off, did really well, ended up started charging for it, charged a lot more for it, charged a lot more for it. And we made that pivot about 5 months into me having an agency and turned it into Tribe Prospecting, which is what we have today. And Tribe has just absolutely taken off. We've made some incredible hires. We've grown a ton. Obviously, we have a cool office now, so that's helpful.
I was just going to say, you have this amazing skyline view office.
Our third office in 18 months because we keep growing. And on top of that, I'm actually looking to purchase another building, which is about 5,000 square feet and probably about $1 million building. So hopefully we don't outgrow that one anytime soon.
How many people do you have on your team right now?
We're a little bit of a hybrid. We're dispersed and we have some local talent as well. So like my COO is in Orlando, my director of strategy is in Pittsburgh. But outside of that, copywriters, video, all that kind of stuff is local. Total, we have 12 plus maybe another 12 contractors. Wow,
that's great. In 18 months. That's awesome, man. Congratulations.
Yeah. It's, my job has transitioned a good bit, from me selling and doing the deliverables and the finance and all the admin tasks and all that to now where I'm pretty much entirely focused on growth. So just growing the business, everything that's external facing. And then I have an amazing team who's arguably better than me at the things that I have them doing, which is amazing to assemble a team that can do that and provide a more quality service than what I was initially providing. And then I get to focus. And so I have even more confidence to grow and sell our business, knowing that our service is just top notch.
Perfect, man. So let's get deeper into what it is that you guys do. So who are you serving and what is the big problem that you're solving?
Yeah. So our tagline essentially is we help agencies experience the freedom of a consistently full pipeline. So our goal is that most agencies are searching for their next deal. They're wondering where their next deal is going to come from. They're tired of picking bad clients. They're tired of getting squeezed out and their margins disappearing, and they're not charging what they're worth, essentially. So I'm a big believer that sales solves a multitude of issues. And I think that revenue solves a lot of problems that you're probably experiencing on a day-to-day basis. And so I experienced that in my business is if I was stressed for time and I was working 80 hours, well, if I just sold another deal, I could hire someone to give me back 30 of those. And similarly, people are like, well, how is that going to solve my hiring or my culture issue? Or how is that going to help me get better clients? And so my rebuttal to that is, well, if you have a consistently full pipeline, meaning you have leads sitting in your CRM today who can close at any day, you're less desperate for the next sale. You don't have to choose that client who you're just not sure if they're going to be good, a good culture fit, a good client that would essentially be an easy knock out of the park home run, as opposed to someone who's going to scope creep you and be a pain and take all your time and squeeze your margins. You can charge more. You can be more selective with who you choose. You can fire bad talent and hire better talent. A lot of issues get solved when you have money. I wish there was another way, but unfortunately there's not. So money does make the world go around to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely don't think it's something that makes you fulfilled or satisfied, but it does make and alleviate a lot of problems.
Yeah, especially in the business world. I mean, it just gives you options. That's a big thing, is that the more money that you have, the more options that you have available to you. So, for example, 100%. You could hire somebody like Joey, to help solve some of your lead generation problems.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks for the plug. So yeah, we, primarily we do done for you prospecting. So, we're kind of trying to solve a new problem nowadays as we've grown, but the initial problem was we just found that most agencies had a hard time generating leads, creating opportunities. And so we set out to solve that issue and continue to perfect our craft on how do we solve the quote unquote traffic issue? How do we generate more traffic to your pipeline? And so we do outbound cold prospecting and sales on your behalf to drive those leads to your door, and then you knock them out and close them. Now, the other issue we run into is we're really good at what we do. And we're trying to solve this problem now is if we drive leads to your door, how do you close them? You may not be a good closer. So even if we drive qualified hot leads to your door, can you knock them out and close them? So now we're trying to solve that problem, and we have some great ideas, but we're not there yet. We're still trying.
No, I mean, I love that you guys are trying to plug another hole, because I definitely see, especially for a lot of the very creative types, who don't necessarily like sales and they don't like closing, that they're losing deals that they shouldn't be losing just because, it's just not their genius. Their genius is creating the plans and doing the strategy and, but you do need to close the deals.
Yeah. And so we obviously, the more opportunities we create, even the worst of salespeople are going to close some.
Yeah.
So we at least solve that issue. Ideally, we combine the two where and the other thing too, and this is what I do when I train salespeople, which I have another business where I help recruit and train salespeople with Jason Swank.
Mm-hmm.
And in that business, what I teach salespeople is that it's all about the reps. So it is a quantitative and qualitative game. So it's both the quality of the outreach and the quantity. But the quality is improved by the quantity. And so the more reps I get, the more free throws I shoot in basketball, the better my essentially my make percentage is going to be. And so I believe that to be true with closing as well. As the more reps we can get you in front of a prospect, the better you're going to get at closing, the higher your closing percentage is, and the more conversions you'll have, which again turns into more revenue, which solves a lot of problems.
Now, is there a specific platform that you're using? Because when you and I met, you did a class actually on LinkedIn, which was amazing. The reality is that I think that like 90% of the messages that I get on LinkedIn are people like spamming me and trying to get my business. Totally. So I have heard that LinkedIn is, the effectiveness is kind of dried up a little bit. So are you?
Yeah, it's exactly. So yeah, LinkedIn is still a big part of what we do. One phrase, and it's part of our core values. We have about 6 core values, but one of them is never fall in love with how you make money, or never fall in love with how you get successful. And LinkedIn was and is still an amazing tool, but never get dependent on where you've seen success in the past. A good example of that is Google Ads.
Mm-hmm.
Google Ads work. They do not work like they worked 10 years ago. Yet a lot of people made a lot of money 10 years ago, and they're still pumping money into it because they're holding on to the success they had at one point instead of trying other opportunities like Facebook. And now Facebook's becoming less, effective. It still is, but less effective than it was 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. And LinkedIn, incredibly successful. I was one of the first people, I would argue, doing true biz dev on LinkedIn 4 years ago. And it was so easy. has become harder. You just have to innovate and become a little bit better at different aspects. And, automation on LinkedIn has become an issue, because people can automate a lot of their messaging, which we know what happens when too many things get automated. You create issues, conversions go way down. But
absolutely.
So we use it as what we consider, we leverage on LinkedIn. We don't expect conversions on LinkedIn. They still happen quite a bit. But our conversions predominantly happen on other mediums and platforms, predominantly cold email. But we utilize LinkedIn to help increase our conversions on email.
Awesome, man. So it's like multi-platform, and is it pretty customized to the client?
It is, 100%. So our process is when we hire a new client, typically agencies, we have some software, some logistics, some financial clients, but predominantly agencies. So when we bring on an agency, we want to understand both who the agency is and who their ideal customer is. We help them define that. We help them refine it. And we really want to make sure we understand who we're going after, because if we can understand who we're going after, the context of our outreach is far more rich, which when you have a rich outreach campaign and strategy, you're going to have higher conversion rates. And so, everything from what type of calls to action do we need to have to what type of content do we need to be pushing on these platforms specifically that help create authority and trust and drive value. And then, from there even is, what cadence, how often should we be hitting these people? If it's in the software space, they're probably getting hit all day long. So we probably need to be more strategic about how we hit them. It's in the manufacturing space, probably not as much. So we can be a little bit more free to send a couple extra messages in maybe a shorter time period. And so there's just all sorts of different strategies. And is it email first, then LinkedIn first, then email, combine the two? Do you do 2 emails, then a LinkedIn message? Like all that stuff we uncover in our researching and just trying to figure out what's the best strategy. Thankfully, I have an amazing team that has taken that off my plate, and they do an even better job than I would.
Awesome, man. Well, let's talk about you as, the CEO of this agency. What is your big why? Because I know you're another guy like me who, you have this big vision, you have your big why. Like, what is your why, and what helps you keep going and pushing, and helps you overcome hurdles and keeps you focused on your end goals? And so tell us what that is for you.
So, we had hit on earlier, revenue and sales solves a lot of issues. I believe that to be the case when it comes to impact as well. I do believe, I forgot the phrase exactly, and I'll probably butcher it, but it's just something along the lines of who's gonna impact more people, the king or the peasant? And it's not saying that the peasant can't have impact, but it's just saying that the king has so much leverage that he can have more impact than, because he has a lot more resources available at his hand. And so one thing that as a business that we strive to be, and one of our core values is what we call uncomfortable generosity, is we want to promote a life of generosity. We've met a lot of people who, at least I have, and a lot of people that I communicate this core value to, is we've met a lot of people who have had a lot of success, whether it be money or business accolades, and they're still empty and they're still feeling as though they're not accomplishing, and they have to just essentially set an even higher goal, and then they hit that goal and they got to set a higher goal, and it's essentially a rat race that they never complete, and it leaves you pretty unsatisfied.
Yeah. So not to say that there's anything wrong with having goals.
No, not at all.
Right? You need goals.
No, I think goals are important. But it's the why behind the goals. And so I think what I do know to be true as well is, just like I've met a lot of people who are miserable, who've achieved a lot of things and hit a lot of quote unquote goals. I've never met somebody who has been incredibly generous with their resources, time, money, and regretted it. And so one thing that I have and strive to instill in my life and in the people around me and the employees I have is, how do we promote a culture of uncomfortable generosity? And when I say uncomfortable, I don't mean that you're giving your last dollar away to be generous. It's that, how can you strive and set generosity goals? How can you strive to be others focused and be about something bigger than yourself? And so something we do internally is we give a percentage of our revenue away. And on top of that, we also encourage giving of our employees by giving them, we pay for their vacation. but we also pay for their generosity to some degree. And essentially say, hey, here's $1,000. We want you to give this to the cause that you care about the most. And anything above that $1,000 that you want to give of your own money, we'll also match that. And so we want to create a culture of people who are thinking about others and how they can impact other people with their resources. Even if the resources aren't that much, it can go a long way. And I think when you can attribute dollar figures to impact, it makes the other goals look small. So for instance, and the reason that I'm here is because just like anybody else who's a high achiever, I mean, if you take any personality test with me, I am like off the charts in terms of just driven, ambitious, goal-centered person. So just like anybody else, I would go away on these retreats and these goal-setting retreats. I'd set these massive Jim Collins, big, hairy, audacious goals, BHAGs, come back with all these net worth and revenue and accumulation goals. I do real estate investment as well. So how many properties can I acquire? I'd come back with all these goals, and I did it this last go around about 8 months ago. And my wife, we're sitting on the beach on vacation. She asked me, hey, how'd your goal setting retreat go? What'd you set? And so I told her my goals, and there's just an emptiness after I explained them to her. It was like, man, this does not feel like even if I achieve these, that I'll be satisfied. And I don't think the answer is to set even bigger ones. And so I scrapped it, and then essentially had this internal monologue with myself of like, what do I know to be true? And that's when I kind of got to the whole, I know a lot of people who are successful and miserable. I don't know many people who are generous and regret it. And so that's how I got to that point in my life where I made this transition of it's no longer about me, it's about other people. But what's funny is as I have changed my shifted my goals to being generous, the goals that I set before, the ones about accumulation and net worth and all these things, I've blown them out of the water.
Wow.
Because I'm focusing on a bigger picture. I can actually attribute, I know that if I make this sale and we grow by this much and we give this percentage to this cause, it's going to have an actual tangible effect on a certain amount of people. For instance, building homes in another country. We know that if we give this much money, it's going to be worth this many homes. That allows me to be even more driven towards revenue and growth and all these things, because I know that the more I sell, the more I give, the more people I impact, and I can actually quantify, and then I can see the faces of the people that I'm actually impacting. And I know you care a lot about that too. That's why it's cool that we're jamming, because it's one reason you have a big heart for TJ, a very misunderstood city.
Absolutely.
And you want to impact the people and create jobs and create impact. And I just think that when we do that, we far surpassed the self-centered goals we probably would have had originally.
Totally. 100%. All right. I want to ask you one last question. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to answer. So, what advice do you have to somebody? Because there's people who are out there and they're like, oh my God, he's grown so much, 18 months, 7 figures, blah, 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 blah. There's no way, they're saying to themselves, there's no way that I can do what Joey's done. He's got this, he's got connections, he's great at sales, he's got, and I don't have any of those things. What's the biggest, give me one giant game-changing, life-changing piece of advice that you would say to somebody like that?
Speed over perfection, for one. I would imagine that a lot of creatives, we get stuck in this. I want to create the perfect outreach campaign. I want to create the perfect blog post. I think speed is far more important. And I think consistency is the silver bullet a lot of us look for. Yeah. So I get asked all the time, being someone who's quote unquote sales guru, which I think is hilarious because I'm not a guru by any means, but I get asked all the time, like, hey, what's working today? Like, what is the thing that I can do that's going to be a game changer for my business? And I say consistency. I think so far too often we either run into failure and we just quit. It gets too hard, or we have a little bit of success, but then we focus on delivering on that project and we neglect continuing to fill the pipeline. Yep. So my advice would be to delegate as much as you can that's non-revenue generating, and focus all of your time and resources on how do I find more revenue? It's out there. Yep. We're in an incredible economy right now where we can find any business anywhere if we just know how to get in front of the right people with the right message at the right time. And the only way you can figure that out, gather that data, is by being consistent.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much for being here today, Joey. I really appreciate your words of advice for everybody. What is the best way for people to get in contact with you?
Yeah, so LinkedIn. So I'm obviously a big proponent of LinkedIn, so you can find me linkedin.com/in/Joey Gilkey. We are also launching a podcast soon called Cold to Close, so be on the lookout for that. Easiest way is just go to tryprospecting.com or LinkedIn, connect with me, let me know you came from the podcast, and love to have a conversation, hang out.
Sweet. And who would be the perfect person to reach out to you today?
We love agencies. Pretty much anybody who has a long sales cycle, higher ticket service, and is looking to scale or remove themselves from the sales process, at least the prospecting side of things. So to predominantly agencies for the most part, but we work with a bunch of different service-based businesses or B2B SaaS. So perfect is if you can afford at least $5,000 a month retainer. That's our minimum, but
Perfect.
that's not for everybody. We've kind of priced ourselves out of some revenue agencies, but it's an investment. So
hey, no, I love it, man. Charge what you're worth. And if you're delivering the results, like if you can't look at $5,000 and say that's a drop in the bucket for for getting XYZ result,
right.
So
Exactly.
Awesome. All right. To all of our listeners, thank you for tuning in today, and make sure you return next Thursday and every Thursday for the next episode of Operation Agency Freedom. Thank you guys for listening. Have a wonderful day.